I guess everybody comes to this stuff from a particular place, and I think it makes it more comprehensible what they're saying when you understand where that place is from. So I have been responsible for the adult cardiac surgical database for quite a long time now. And off the back of that, we've collected outcomes, but we've also had to think how those outcomes feed into to governance systems. I chaired the FSSA working group on revalidation a couple of years ago, and more recently, I've taken on a responsibility for HQIP in terms of the wider publication of outcomes. So I think what I'm saying is coming from the basis of having a background in outcomes and trying to think through how those would feed into the revalidation process. So this slide, or a similar sort of type of this slide, has been seen on a number of occasions, I expect, over the last few days here, in that the failures in Bristol, one of the solutions to that was to make data on outcomes available at a granular level down to individual consultant teams. That's happened in cardiac surgery. It hasn't happened widely through medicine, but that's one of the recommendations, again, which has come out of the Francis report. And the purpose of that is twofold. Firstly, there's good evidence that doing that drives up quality of care overall. And secondly, that actually prevents the bad apples continuing to practice in that way and gives an opportunity for remediation or other appropriate action. So we've thought this through in terms of what do we think are the stages of clinical governance. And we think they're about defining a standard, developing and supporting the infrastructure to measure those standards, working out what's acceptable and unacceptable variation from those standards, investigating possible instances of poor performance, and then making judgments off the back of those investigations. And obviously, different groups will have a responsibility for that. I haven't put the GMC in there because all of this is necessarily subservient to good medical practice. But I believe the only people who can define those standards with respect to clinical outcomes are the professional societies, and that should be done in conjunction with patient groups. In terms of developing and supporting the infrastructure, I think professional societies should be involved in that, but might need other expert IT and methodological support. In terms of defining unacceptable variance, again, I think only professional societies can do that, and HQIP have tried to write some guiding documentation around that. When it comes to investigating these things, I don't think professional societies are have indemnity to do this, so often we'll want to do that in conjunction with other groups, such as the Royal Colleges, NCAS, etc., etc., etc. And when it comes to making judgments, there's two judgments which really need to be made. One is from the employer perspective and the other is from the GMC perspective. And that might be supported by the other organisations, but those are the people who have the responsibilities for saying yay or nay when push comes to shove. So in terms of how does that process work in cardiac surgery for outcomes, well, we define the outcome, and for us it's risk-adjusted in-hospital mortality. There are other things we could use, but that's what we're using at the moment. You set a standard for that. You define the acceptable and unacceptable variation from that standard. It's important that any judgments made are made on validated data, so you have to take that data back to the individual surgeons and the units, and then we notify those outliers through our governance process, and then we publish the data on our website. So the standard that we have set, the bar, if you like, is the contemporary mortality for all cardiac surgery in the UK, with a few exclusions, which I won't get into right now. And what we've said sort of philosophically is that all surgeons and hospitals should have a mortality rate that's not significantly higher than that standard after making appropriate adjustments for case mix. So how do you do that? How do you define acceptable and unacceptable variation? Well, this is our process. We adjust for case mix, and the major reason we do that is because if we don't do that, we think we will encourage high-risk patients to be turned down for surgery, and we think that makes the basis for fair comparisons. We calibrate for contemporary practice because mortality is improved. If we use a model we produced 10 years ago, that's now out of date, so we have to calibrate the model for current performance. We understand the limitations of those risk adjustment models. We've been doing this for a while, so we've been thinking about it and written about it and stuff, and we actually exclude emergency and salvage cases. For us, that's a very small proportion of our case mix, and we know that confounds the analysis. We use funnel plot methodology because that doesn't necessarily lend itself to sort of league table type approaches, and we do some other fancy statistical stuff to ensure that the analysis is robust. All that data goes back to the units. It's an iterative process. We do everything we can to make sure it's as right as it possibly can be. We define low-level outliers, if you like, and definitive outliers based on the statistics. The president of our professional society has a responsibility for notifying the units and for the units and the individuals, and he does that by a mixture of different communication methods, but we try and do this as supportively as possible through the professional society. And all decisions we make about this stuff, we have a patient representative who supports us and advises us with that. And then we put that out on the website, as most people know. So this is how the analysis looks. So each of those dots is a surgeon. There's the different sort of lines there, 95, 99, and a multiply adjusted 95% confidence interval. And you can see the vast majority of people fall within the funnel, but some don't. The point here, I guess, is that every surgeon who is there, and these are all the surgeons in the UK, has been compliant in a national audit and has sort of ticked a box of being involved in a quality improvement methodology. But not every doctor here is getting outcomes which people should be comfortable with. So how do you then go from that to actually making judgments with respect to revalidation? So the options for a responsible officer, as I understand it, and I very much hesitate to say this stuff with Peter Rubin here, but I have read it, and I have just quoted it here, so I suspect I've not got it too far wrong. But the options are you can make a positive recommendation, you can request a referral, or you can go for non-engagement in revalidation. So those are the options. And the responsible officer is asked to make that positive recommendation on the basis of these things here. And I was working out how somebody whose mortality rates which were higher than expected would feed into that. And I guess that feeds into this box here, any unaddressed concerns about a doctor's fitness to practice. So automatically, all those surgeons who have outcomes which are well within the funnel produce this automatic data to support positive revalidation. So for us, a big chunk of our revalidation portfolio just comes from taking your particular dot on that particular funnel and putting that into your folder. Obviously, there's a number of surgeons here whose mortality rates are higher than expected, and those need to be considered further through the local appraisal process. And if those things aren't resolved, then some judgments need to be made at some stage down the line. And again, these are the more serious outliers where people need to think hard about that. Assuming the data is valid, you need to work through this process. Is it due to your case mix? Is it due to organizational factors? Is it due to individual factors? And if it is due to individual factors, what does that mean? And so far, how would that feed into your revalidation judgments? We've also been thinking quite hard about patient experience measurement. And we've got a process now for this, which we've done in conjunction with PICA Europe, which we've piloted through our department, where the process is you have a consultation in the outpatient clinic, you digitally dictate the letter, that patient then gets identified from the system, which leads to the questionnaire going out. So we've done this through cardiology, cardiac surgery, thoracic surgery, and we did inform all the consultants that it was happening, but when I gave them their feedback from this stuff, most of them didn't even know it had happened. So this happens remote from people. People don't really know it's going on. And we're planning to make this a continuing process to feed back. So there's a pilot study which we've done of this and looking at the sort of statistics and how well this works. So this is one doctor's feedback. This is a sort of summary thing here. We may change the names. We've got improvement needed, may need some improvement, acceptable, no improvement necessary. So this is one doctor's score, which is obviously very good, which would feed into revalidation. This is another doctor whose score is significantly worse, may need some improvement. So we've got a sort of bar here, if you like, and the bar is defined by the peer group, and people perform in a different way with respect to that bar. So if you look at that particular doctor, these are the various domains that they were asked about, which are taken straight from good medical practice, and this particular doctor scores below average on all of those kind of things. So I don't feel comfortable with that, and obviously that needs to be addressed. So again, as with outcomes, it shouldn't just come at you when you get to your revalidation date. There should be annual appraisal, this should be feeded in, supportive remediation should be put in. So again, moving from that to the revalidation decisions, in my view, if you're in this sort of situation, in this sort of box at the top there, that's a positive recommendation. If you're falling down to the bottom there, we need to get a bit more sophisticated about this. You might need, if you haven't resolved these things through the appraisal cycle, to go for a revalidation deferral request. If you can't get it sorted out, then some serious judgments need to be made, which can probably only be made by the GMC. So again, this is the final thing I want to say today. So if you go and search on me through the GMC sort of register, if you like, that's what you currently get about me. And I wonder in the future whether that might change. My data revalidation is next year. I've done all my stuff, actually. And because we've got all these information systems in place, it took me about 3 hours to put it all together because it kind of all existed. But I wonder whether we might get to the sort of position of transparency where you can click on that particular thing and find the evidence on which your revalidation decision is made. which would have something like this: your case mix, which is at the top right, your outcomes on the bottom right, your patient experience score is pasted there, some stuff about CPD activity, summary of your MSF data, and summary of your annual appraisals. And I wonder whether that might be where we were getting to, because I think that would reassure the public. Just to show you that's not a pipe dream, this is what we currently have on our website. So we have pretty much the same thing. We're doing this for the whole of cardiac surgery, thoracic surgery, cardiology, and we've got a 12-month program to cascade this right across the trust. So again, links there to your activity and results, the national results, the patient experience data, and we're thinking through about whether we should put the other stuff on there at the moment. So that's all live at the moment. So my thoughts on this is obviously revalidation has started. I think it's unfortunate we put these specialty templates into stuff for the various different specialist associations a couple of years ago, but there hasn't been as much progress as I would have liked to see on that being developed over the last couple of years to support revalidation. But I think what's happening now with the Everyone Counts announcement about publication of results is a huge amount of energy and activity is happening in that domain to take this forward very rapidly over the next few months. There will be further momentum about the outcome measurement and patient experience agenda coming from these various external contexts, which everybody's been talking about for the last couple of days. I think there are some pragmatic solutions, and I'm not entirely clear about where the bar stands. I've given some thoughts on my view about where the bar stands, but I would be very interested for comments on that down the line. And I suspect the whole transparency agenda will affect this as well, and I've given some thoughts about how I see that might go forwards. Thank you very much.